I am going to get started. I am Kim Baxter. I'm the Associate Director for Programs and Services, and I want to welcome you to our first official presentation for this cycle on governance, and we are blessed to have Sister Judy Carey with us today, and I'm going to do some formal introductions after I go over a few Blue Jeans logistics, and then I will lead us in a short prayer, and then turn things over to Sister Judy. In terms of Blue Jeans, what I'm going to ask everybody to do is to mute yourselves. So if you run your cursor up to the top of the screen, you will see a video icon, a microphone icon, a screen icon. If you would mute yourself, that will help us to cut down on any feedback. For future presentations, you might consider, if you have them available, some earbuds. That also helps with being able to hear the presentation. It also cuts down on feedback. So that's something for the next time. And also for the next session, when you sign on to Blue Jeans, if you are able to type in your name, and if you could do your first and last name, that would be helpful to the other participants as we get to know one another, and it would be helpful to the speaker as well. So for today, we have a lot of people that it just says guest and a number. So for future presentations, if you could type in your name, that would be very helpful. We also have several people coming in just through a phone line, and I'm not sure who you are because I only see a phone number. So if you could, in the chat feature, type in your phone number and who you are, then I will know better who is here. And likewise, for those of you who are guest number 1, number 2, if you are not able to add your name as we are progressing, if you could just say I'm guest number so and so, then I'll be able to have a better record of attendance. So, does anyone have any questions? And remember, you'll have to mute yourself and unmute yourself when you want to talk. So if anyone has any questions at this point, I will field them. If you have any questions or need assistance during the presentation, you can add something in the chat feature, and I will try to address it through that method. So any questions? Okay, wonderful. So for prayer, I sent you a prayer that is from a book called Redeeming Administration, 12 Spiritual Habits for Catholic Leaders in Parishes, Schools, Religious Communities, and Other Institutions. It's by a woman by the name of Anne Garrido, and we will be using several of the prayers that she offers in this book throughout all of our sessions. So I did send that to everyone just mainly so that you would see that bibliographic reference and have it, for a resource. It's really an excellent book that you may want to consider purchasing for yourself and your school. So that being said, if we could all place ourselves in God's presence. O Lord, the highway of life moves very quickly for me. There is much I want to accomplish this week, this month. There are many places I need to go and many people I want to see. And yet there are all sorts of speed bumps molded into the road I travel, asking me to slow down, to look around before accelerating again. Help me to welcome the moments when my job demands I pause, assess, and consider. Help me, rather than seeing unnecessary obstacles, to embrace these opportunities to grow in reflectiveness. Open my eyes to all that these moments illuminate for me as an administrator in this institution and as a disciple in your reign. Amen.
Amen.
So as I said, we are so fortunate to have Sister Judy Carey with us today. If I gave you all of her credentials, we would not have any time for the presentation, but please allow me to share a few of her experiences. Sister Judy is a facilitator and an organizational consultant. She has retired as the Vice President of Mission Integration at St. Francis Hospital and Medical Center in Hartford, Connecticut. She was the President of the Connecticut Regional Community of the Sisters of Mercy in West Hartford. She was also Vice President and Director of Corporate Ministry for the Sisters of Mercy. At the University of St. Joseph in West Hartford, Sister Judy has served as Director of the Gengras Center, as Associate Professor, and as Chairperson of the Special Education Department. She has participated in the development of sponsorship structures for the Conference of Mercy Higher Education in the Northeast community and has assisted other religious congregations regarding mission, sponsorship, the role of members, and bylaw development. Sister Judy facilitated the Catholic Health Association Collaborative Think Tank on sponsorship of Catholic ministries and the annual Catholic Health Association Physicians Forum. Facilitation, board, and organizational development and training, mission formation, team building, sponsorship structures, leadership and management training are some of the other areas of consultation. She also has a lot of experience serving on many, many boards. And I want to welcome Sister Judy. Thank you for being with us, and I'm going to turn things over to her.
Thanks, Kim. In essence, everything that Kim has shared is when you get to this point, it all means I'm old, and I've had a lot of different experiences and blessed with them. So I'm delighted to be with you. For those of you that know me, know that I'd rather see you face to face and engage with you on this time, but we're going to do our best. And what I will periodically do is just stop at different segments just to make sure in case there are any questions. And clearly, if after the presentation and you have other questions, don't hesitate. Kim can look me up, and you're more than welcome to call or any other way that I can support you. So if we could just look at the agenda, because so many
Judy,
of you.
I'm sorry, Sister Judy. I just have to interrupt for one moment.
Sure.
Someone besides Sister Judy is sharing their screen, and I'm not sure who that is. So if you could, so we see a Blue Jeans login screen. If you could stop sharing your screen, that would be great. Now I see something else. Okay, Sister Judy, it looks like I'm going to need you to. It looks like the PowerPoint went off. Could you share your? Look to see if you're still sharing your screen.
Well, it looks. What happened was, you left too. So I just want to be sure I'm still on Blue Jeans.
You're still here.
Okay.
I can see you. We just.
So now I'll go back to trying to share the screen.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, we've got it. Wonderful.
Are we back now?
We are back.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so let's take a look at that agenda. As I started to say that, many of you to
Hi, this is Caroline.
Mercy Sponsored Ministries.
Hi.
And I thought it'd be really important to just go back a little bit so you see the context of how MESA fits into the history of our sponsorship. And then to talk about, well, why do we even have MESA? Why are we doing this? And then a little bit about the legal responsibilities of a nonprofit, of which each of our schools are. A little bit about the legal structure and how it relates to the Sisters of Mercy. And that I will touch on right from the beginning a bit. And then roles and responsibilities of members, which that should have been a capital M, and the board of directors of each of the schools, some standards of conduct, and then any reflection on our session or any questions that you might have. And I'll try to be as specific as possible and also try to stop. And Kim, we can stop at period times where people could then ask a question. Is that correct?
Yes, as often as you would like.
Okay. So let's go first to that this legacy of sponsored ministries. I often talk about, way back when the Sisters of Mercy began to open schools and hospitals, and probably at that time the board meeting was sitting around the supper table deciding what to do next and how to handle whatever they were doing and what to build and what the curriculum was. And as you know, as time has gone on and as these ministries began to grow, and also the civil types of responsibilities within each of the state's laws, then we moved into the formation of civil corporations. So it's very important to know that the Sisters of Mercy in every state and our institute have the authority, and that's church law, not civil law. Church law or canon law gives that authority to Sisters of Mercy to start ministries on behalf of the church and to hold property and to call them Catholic. And that is very specific in canon law, and that remains today, that we can sponsor, as other religious communities do as well, a ministry on behalf of the church and call it Catholic. And so, as I said, in response to the needs, these ministries began to grow both in education, healthcare, and social service. The there were still, even in the probably late 80s, there were still some ministries that were not separately incorporated. But for the most part, all along, the high schools and elementary schools became separately incorporated as a civil structure within their state. Now, that is allowed in the sense that instead of having, so your typical board of directors is the one that is legally responsible in nonprofit corporations. But with religious communities, because we have that authority from Rome, there is a certain responsibility on the sponsors to ensure that each of those ministries are really working on behalf of the church, that the mission is alive, and that and they are following the teachings of the church and calling it Catholic. So as these civil structures became nonprofits, separately incorporated, we had what we called a two-tiered corporation in the United States. You had the members, which in the past was the local leadership. So I'll use the example of Connecticut. So when I was in leadership in Connecticut, and we had Laurelton, and the leadership exercised some of those canon law responsibilities, like bylaws. We had to approve any changes in the bylaws. We had to approve any changes in the mission, because we were the ones both from the church perspective, responsible to ensure that the mission was alive, and that it was following as I said earlier, the teachings of the church. We at that point appointed board members, and if there was engagement around the certificate of incorporation. So there were basically about 5. We had to approve debt beyond a certain point, because from canon law's perspective, you had to ensure the viability of this corporation. And that structure was in effect for many, many, many years. And so with all the sponsored ministries of the Sisters of Mercy in Connecticut, we had to perform those legal responsibilities and then delegate to the Board of Trustees that responsibility for the day-to-day affairs of that corporation. So with Laurelton, the Board of Trustees then shared that governing authority with specific delegated authorities to them. And I just note the word trustee, and that's not just connected to church groups. I happen to sit on the Connecticut Hospital Association board, and they call it a board of trustees. But I think the concept is that the sponsors, the Sisters of Mercy, are entrusting to our lay men and women and our colleagues on our boards that shared mission of this ministry. And so this corporate structure came because the Sisters of Mercy wanted to continue to sponsor. And as time was going on, we needed to have a civil structure that would protect that school, that we could still be sponsors and fulfill the nonprofit responsibilities. Also, you have to follow the laws within your state, and there's a non-stock law. Every state has a few little differences in it, but pretty much the essence is there. So we had to be in compliance in having a structure within a civil structure, but it also met the responsibilities that canon law imposed on a sponsor if we were to start a ministry. Now, this is where I'm very much, I usually have chart paper and I'm making boxes and trying to show everything, so I hope that's clear. Can't do that today. So as time went on, we pretty much probably in the 80s, late 70s, began to have more in healthcare initially, more laymen and women on our boards and in leadership positions. And we wanted to be sure that we really needed to define what this relationship was with the Sisters of Mercy. And so there was a canon law tried to describe it, or the Canon Law Society tried to describe it. It's something that kind of evolved. Sponsorship, that word sponsorship is not in canon law. It's a word, as you have there, a formal relationship. It was basically an effort to describe what's the relationship now with the Sisters of Mercy and the entity that has been formed as a civil corporation. So that definition is one that has stood the test of time, and it's a formal relationship between the recognized Catholic organization, Sisters of Mercy, and this legally formed entity, so your school, entered into for the sake of promoting and sustaining the church's mission in the world. So sometimes it's important to be clear about sponsorship because that word is used a lot. We're sponsoring this event or dance or fundraiser, but this is different. And this is how the Sisters of Mercy want to be in relationship with this ministry. And the members of that corporation, as I said, typically was the leadership team, and they had certain authority, and then the board had certain authority. So that is what was in existence for a long time. And so just a little bit more about sponsorship. because when we moved to Mesa, you can see that there's still some consistency with that and the why. So it derives from the mission of the church. As a Catholic organization, we have to be faithful to the church teachings and directives. Now, in Catholic healthcare, there are other additional directives, as with higher ed. We have to be sure that we are faithful to the ministry and protect the administration of the ministry and the assets. And canon law expects that they hold the Sisters of Mercy accountable for these ministries that we, in their eyes and in our eyes, that we are sponsoring on behalf of the church. I think it is sacred trust that canon law provides as well to protect that we are going to be faithful to the church and to the values of the Sisters of Mercy. And you could take this with every other religious community that has sponsored ministries, and this is what was clearly built over time. And that the desire, so let me just go back there to make this transition. So sponsorship is what the church refers to now, or what is referred to as the relationship with the Sisters of Mercy and then the boards. Now, you recall, if those of you that were around a bit, it would be the leadership team acting as the members, and then there would be the board. And so there was no in between. And there was that step. So if there would be meetings together, special meetings, annual meetings between the Sisters of Mercy, or the administration or the leadership of the Sisters of Mercy, who in that role were called members. And that member role had certain authorities as outlined in the bylaws. So as time went on, and as you know, as the Sisters of Mercy, we were 25 separate groups for a long time after we formed the Institute. And then we were moving towards regionalizing. So we had the regional formation of Northeast, West, Midwest, which we are still in at this point. So at that time, and I can speak for just so that you get the context of the step in between. When we formed the Northeast in 2006, a year or so or two before that, we began to look at, well, how are we now? 6 groups were functioning as members, 6 leadership teams. We were now going to have 1 leadership team. So how were we going to continue the responsibility and the stewardship of the ministries that were set up? And so we worked on a structure that was a change. And so the members of the Northeast team were still members of the corporation, but they delegated to an in-between group called the Sponsors Council. And it was probably named something different in each of the communities. I don't know all the names, but that's basically that idea was that for in the Northeast, there were 6 leadership teams. So we had at least 25 people. That was going down to 5. So 5 could not do all those ministries. In the Northeast, we had 43 sponsored ministries. Now, many of them were healthcare, and many of them were in systems, and then the colleges and universities were already in the Conference of Mercy Higher Ed. So we created a Sponsors Council, which was that in-between group, and we had 15 ministries when we started that had to have the same relationship as the sisters, the leadership teams did when we were just separate 25. I hope that's clear. And so now, and I'll stop after, before I go on to Mesa. So now as we're moving in the journey of oneness as one piece, But as we are, the numbers of our sisters being able to function also in roles of authority or in sponsors council, but basically we did that also for the whole sense of coming together to support one another in that mission of education. So in 2005, we formed the Conference of Mercy Higher Ed, and that, sponsored by the Institute, the sponsorship role doesn't change. Some of those member authorities delegated to the Conference of Mercy Higher Ed Board, and all the 15 colleges and universities were assumed under that. So Connecticut leadership team members no longer were the sponsors of the University of St. Joseph. The Institute was the sponsor. They assumed that role. And that structure then had a board for the conference where the Institute delegated authority to that board, but still the sponsor, and still had certain accountability to Rome and to as the sponsor in the United States, and fulfilling that canon law requirement that we protect the mission and provide oversight to that ministry.